Great. A warm welcome to all of you who have joined the Your Journey Back to Work webinar today. My name is Alex Day. I'm the Director of Social Impact for the Reed Group, and I've also been working on the Keep Britain Working campaign. I'm going to be hosting the webinar today. Before we introduce our guests, I'll just spend a few minutes outlining the Keep Britain Working campaign. Keep Britain Working, as many of you know, the campaign's objective is simple. It's to preserve jobs and to protect livelihoods. We launched the campaign on the 20th of April with a focus around 3 pillars. Firstly, sharing. So sharing ideas, sharing commitments, or what we're calling pledges on social media for how we can keep Britain working, and resources as well. Today, we actually launched a redundancy support booklet. So if you're in that position or you know someone who is, you can find that resource on the Keep Britain Working website in the resources section. The second pillar is around connecting. So connecting people from sectors and businesses which are struggling into industries where there is a demand for workers. And the third area is around inspiring. So inspiring the country to rebuild as we move out of this crisis. We want to use what we've learned through the campaign to inspire change at grassroots level all the way up to senior levels of government. We've had backing from an amazing range of companies and business leaders like Lord Sugar, Liv Garfield, the CEO of Severn Trent Water, PricewaterhouseCoopers, James Timpson, Baroness Karen Brady. We've had hundreds of supporters sign up, thousands of people visiting the Keep Britain Working website, and millions of impressions on social media using the hashtag Keep Britain Working. We're working daily with companies who are making fantastic commitments and also some who are needing support to redeploy workers at this time. If you haven't already, we'd love for you to get involved. On the screen, you can find 3 simple ways to get involved. You can share an idea for how we can keep Britain working. You can make your own pledge to keep Britain working and share it on social media. And you can sign up for the campaign to receive the latest updates, including information about future webinars such as this. As I said, the campaign's objective is around preserving jobs and protecting livelihoods. And unfortunately, we know that people have already lost their jobs, and projections indicate there may be more job losses to come, particularly as things like the job retention scheme phase out. We've been contacted by many people who are in that situation, some who are looking for a job for the first time in a while, which is why we wanted to run this webinar today. We hope this session will provide a really practical guide and support for you. I'm joined today by our 2 guest speakers. I'd like to start by welcoming Yvette Jeal. Yvette is an executive coach with 20 years of experience in business, helping people throughout their careers. Welcome, Yvette. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi. Thank you, Alex. Hi.
And next, I'd like to welcome James. James is Chairman and CEO of the Reed Group. Many of you, I'm sure, will know James. Hello, James. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Alex, and thanks everyone for joining us this morning, or this afternoon, I should say now.
Great. We're delighted to be joined by both James and Yvette. Lots of experience on this call, diverse working backgrounds, and I know will offer kind of varying perspectives on the journey back to work. Just a bit of housekeeping. The format today will be I'll ask some questions back and forth to James and Yvette, which will go for around 30 minutes. But then there is also the opportunity for you to ask questions, some of which have been pre-submitted, but you can also submit them via the chat function on Microsoft Teams. So we'll do our best to answer as many questions as we can towards the end of the call. Please do get involved. We'd love to hear your questions. Feel free to type and we'll get through as many of them as we can. Also, I know, having been on many webinars recently, there's often issues with being able to hear properly. If you've got internet connection issues, don't worry. We're recording this webinar and we will make sure it's available to everyone afterwards. So without further ado, we'll move on to the questions. James, you run Reed, the UK's largest family-run recruitment business. And Yvette, your background includes coaching clients through key moments in their career. What experiences are you both going to draw on and share with our audience today? Perhaps Yvette, you can kick off.
Hi there. Yes, as you say, I work with clients in a coaching capacity around key transition moments in their career. So it might be helping them towards promotion, helping them onboard into a new role or look for a new role and prepare for interview. So in all of these things, there's a similar theme that runs through it, which is basically being able to tell your career story and bring it to life and talk about it in a conversational way at interview. So I thought today it'd be really good to concentrate on some of these points for people that are going out there and trying to look for work again.
Brilliant, thanks. And James?
Well, as you said, Alex, I run Reed, the recruitment company, and it's a family company. So in a sense, I grew up with recruitment and helping people progress their careers and jobs. And I've been sort of in the thick of it for a quarter of a century now in my role at Reed. I've also written 3 books, which I slightly pompously call my career trilogy. And I hope that I can call upon them, the content in those books this afternoon, because the first one, the 7-second CV, is all about how to prepare a CV. And I say to people, you know, how often is it you prepare a life-changing document? And well, that's your CV. The second one in the series is all about how to do interviews. Why you? 101 interview questions you'll never fear again. And that has been very successful, and there's lots of supporting sort of reviews on Amazon for that book. So I hope people will continue to find that helpful, and we're actually working on a new edition. And the third book is a more sort of long view, I suppose, of how to think about your career based on my own experiences, and that's called Life's Work. So I'll be calling on those as well.
Brilliant, thank you. Before we get into the real kind of meat and potatoes of our discussion today, James, can you just paint a picture of what's happening in the job market at the moment?
Well, I think everyone's aware of this, that the pandemic has caused great change in all aspects of life, and the job market in particular. We've seen the number of vacancies advertised on reed.co.uk go down substantially. But, and it's important to stress, there are still close to 100,000 live jobs on reed.co.uk at the moment, and we've repurposed the site really to present jobs that are most urgently seeking support and people at the moment. So there's a lot of jobs in distribution, in healthcare, working from home jobs. So there's still a lot of jobs, but the number of jobs has come down. And the way we work has changed very dramatically as well. This is a good example. So a lot of people now becoming very accustomed to working from home and working effectively from home. So there's great change in the labour market, and I expect some of that change to be enduring. It will be interesting how the next few months pan out, but huge change, which creates opportunities as well as difficulties.
Yeah, absolutely. Yvette, what are you hearing from your clients?
Well, oh, hello. It's interesting because I work with a real variety of clients across the board, so different industry sectors, and some are super busy, so such as tech companies. But what's different is that they're having to pull projects off in a matter of weeks that would normally take months. So it's different kinds of skill sets that's needed. So like lots of innovation, lots of adaptability. And, you know, we're talking here about people going out into the workplace. And I think it's really key that they demonstrate those kind of skills when they're looking for work. So, I mean, I literally heard yesterday about somebody who was a race mechanic who's now an ice cream van driver. And it's just, you know, really having that mindset where you're up for doing different things and what's actually needed.
Great, thank you. And Yvette, you mentioned storytelling in your first answer. Could you just explain to us a bit more about what you mean by that?
Yes, I'm actually really passionate about this point. So when I'm working with people, basically imagine you're going for promotion or a new job. It's all about when you're in that moment of having to explain or being in an interview situation, being able to tell your story, to talk about your brand. And I think people sometimes, you know, become very formal when in fact it's really good to bring it to life with anecdotes. And I'll give you an example. I have a client who always talks about when he was young, his dad taught him to play darts, and he used to stand him on a stool and teach him to play darts, but he'd never let him win. So after I think it was 13, after quite a few years of keep trying, he beat his dad fair and square. And he says that really taught him to, you know, be persistent, and if you keep working at something, you're going to get there. And he said it's taken him through his whole career. But when you bring little anecdotes in like that in an interview situation, I think it really makes it more personal, and it makes even the interviewer relax. So I think understanding what, you know, if your career was a story, what would the plot line be, and how would you talk about that?
Great, that's really powerful. James, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, well, one of my regrets is that I taught my son how to play chess, and I haven't had a look in lately. He keeps saying, "Do you want to play? Do you want to play?" And I'm taking a hammering. I think an interview is a conversation, and I think it's really important to remember that. And a job is a problem to be solved. So if you're able to explain and tell your story in a way that's compelling. I mean, someone once told me that the most powerful words in the English language, if you want to get someone's attention, are "let me tell you a story." And we're sort of all hardwired to be interested in that, you know, like little kids, you know, "Mummy, mummy, daddy, daddy, tell me a story." I mean, they always want to hear stories, and we're the same as adults. So I would agree with what Yvette says. And I think, you know, when you're in a conversation with someone about a job, which we call an interview, I mean, they want to know more about you, the person. I mean, they've seen you on paper, and they've seen, you know, the qualifications and the experience you have, but they want to get to know you as a person. And I think stories are a good way of doing that.
Brilliant, thanks, James.
I'd even add to that, Alex, if I may.
Please.
I'd even add to that you know, it doesn't always have to be like, it can be challenging, the situations you're talking about. So, you know, what we're all going through right now is incredibly challenging, but maybe people have, you know, learned that they're more resilient than they thought, or that they're more adaptable, and that will be part of their story when they're going to talk about interviews and talking about next roles.
Brilliant, thank you.
I also think it's worth thinking about one's own life as a story, and that it has different chapters. And, you know, in life we go through good times and tough times, and you know, this for a lot of people and a lot of businesses is a tough time, but it's quite good if we can compartmentalize it in a way as a chapter in our lives, and then we move on to the next chapter, and, you know, the next episode. So it's a continuing thing. You know, there is no finish line as such, but the story goes on. And I've found that really helpful in my career. You know, when we've gone through difficult moments, think, well, this is an episode. It's not forever.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you, James. As we've kind of already mentioned, the CV is a critical part of the job search. As someone who's probably looked over thousands of CVs, what advice can you offer to those on the call about how to best represent yourself through your CV?
Well, the obvious advice is keep it short and concise. I mean, it should fit on one piece of paper. I know that sounds old-fashioned. I mean, you can have two sides or one, but keep it short and concise. Make sure there are no mistakes in it. There are so many that just get binned immediately for the silly typos and errors. Make sure there are no mistakes in it. And CV is from the Latin curriculum vitae, the course of one's life, I think it means. Well, don't try and pack everything in. I mean, you should be tailoring your CV to the types of job that you're applying for. And that's not to say make things up, it's to emphasize the things that will be most important to those people who will be looking at it. And the book that I wrote called The 7-Second CV is called The 7-Second CV. Not because you should spend 7 seconds preparing a CV, but that's typically how long someone will spend looking at it, which is kind of scary. That you know, you put all your life into one document and someone will look at it for up to 7 seconds. So you've got to have things in it that will grab their attention and that will make you stand out. So little sections like the hobbies and interests section, I think, are quite interesting, because if you've got an interesting hobby or you've got a real passion in your life outside of work, make sure you put it in. I always look at that section. And I think, you know, if you're in a team at work, make sure you stress what your team has accomplished, just in 1 or 2 lines, so that the person reading the document can see very quickly that you're someone who's really made a contribution to the organization you're in, and that someone who has wider passions and interests, which is usually appealing.
Great. And Yvette, anything to add to that from your clients and what you've seen in terms of CVs?
Yeah, I think that CVs can be, you know, quite dull for the reader. They have to go through a lot of them sometimes. So making it 3D and bringing it to life is really important. And at the end of the day, it's the tool that's going to get you through the door. You know, obviously in the interview, you have to do the rest. But I think the profile at the top is the first piece that people are going to read. It's almost like your elevator pitch. So I think having keywords in that, and when they read it, it's a sense of you. It engages them to even want to read down the page. And I think, as James said, it's not just a list of duties. It's actually putting your achievements in there. So, you know, if you've implemented you've been on an interesting project and implemented a system, what did that mean to the business? What did you get involved in? Did you have to, you know, communicate, build relationships with people? It's just helping the reader to understand what you've actually done.
On our website, it's worth stressing there are templates for CVs, so you can go on, and I was helping my son create a CV the other day using one of these templates, and they're really convenient. And there are different templates depending on what stage you are in your career. So if you just graduated or left college or school, there's a template for that. There's a template for people who maybe got 10 years of experience. There's a template for people who are looking to transition from one career to another, where you stress your skills or your transferable skills. So it's important to have a look at those so that you can tailor it to your stage in your working life. And I think a CV is a life-changing document, and it serves actually just one purpose, which is to get you in front of someone, in front of someone you want to talk to. So it's a marketing document, and you're marketing yourself, and it's really important to give that your best shot. So get other people to review it for you, get as much advice as you can on the content, use these templates and resources like the book I've done and other books, because you'll get something out of that will help you. And it's just little advantages that make big differences in this scenario, because companies will see lots of CVs, as was mentioned, thousands and thousands of them, but you want yours to be the one they pick out.
Brilliant. And James, you mentioned the website there. That's read.co.uk, correct?
That's read.co.uk. Yeah, that's surprisingly enough, that's the one I'm encouraging people to visit, and it's got lots of jobs on, and it's got this very helpful resource, which is the CV template, which I've used myself, and it works.
Excellent. Brilliant. Thank you. We've talked about the kind of current state of the jobs market and the importance of building your personal brand, your story, expressing that in your CV, and hopefully all of that leads to an interview. James, what else can help someone in their job search?
Well, this is a sort of big question, and it's a big part of the third book, Life's Work, because ultimately it's about what do you want to do, and what floats your boat, what excites you, how do you want to spend your time. These are really big and important questions for all of us, and I think it's really important that before any of us embark on a job search that we've given that proper attention, because it's important to end up somewhere you're going to be happy. And our sort of brand slogan is Love Mondays. I think it's possible for everyone to find a job that they enjoy, but that's a two-way street, and it's really important to have the sort of self-clarity about what's right for me or what's right for you. And that's for me the critical starting point of any of these processes. And it's not about listening to what your parents say. They might know you well, and they might have some good ideas. At least I think so for my kids. But ultimately it's deep down inside. Who are you? Who do you want to be? And how are you going to become that person? I think that's really important. And then put the time in. Talk to people. Ask for input. Put the time in, because when people go to interviews, they so often say, "Oh, I wish I'd been better prepared." And these are really important moments in life. So put the time in to be prepared. Do your research, talk to people who might work in that area, find out as much as you can before you go and meet people. And then you'll find that you're much more confident about why you're there and why they should hire you. And that usually results in them doing so.
Brilliant. And Yvette, what would you kind of add to that in terms of kind of getting ready for an interview? What advice do you give your clients in those situations?
So I think that it's really, I'd really like to talk about something that actually happened last week, because it's a real live situation. I've been working with a client for the past 2 months towards a promotion, and it's a job that she really, really wanted. And so we spent time, working on this, and I got a phone call last week saying that she got the job, and it was absolutely fantastic. So I said that I was coming on here, and what could I share with everybody that had really helped her? And she said that it boiled down to 3 key things. The first one was that we talked about the interview being a conversation. And I mean, I personally like to wipe the word interview out of the dictionary, because I think the minute you say it, people start to freeze and, become somebody that they're not. So we talked about it being a conversation, and the fact that, the client will be driving to work thinking, or maybe not at the moment, but driving to work thinking, I want to fill that role. So they've got their own agenda, and that really it's just 2 people meeting to have a conversation and see if it fits. And she said that really helped. Secondly, we really did talk through what her journey had been. So we actually used your book, James. We used the Fateful 15. There are 15 questions in James's book, which are the most asked questions, and we practiced those. And we practiced bringing anecdotes in, and until it flowed, until she felt like she could talk about it naturally. And she said that when she went into the interview, she felt like she really owned it, which is obvious because it's her story. And then finally, I think the most powerful one was that she said it had given her, that this experience had given her permission to almost be herself. And before that, she would always go into an interview quite formal and use a lot of corporate language, and this time she didn't. She just was herself. And I think if you can bring yourself to an interview, the interviewer is going to buy into you a lot more, and you're going to help them to relax and have more of a flowing conversation.
Great.
So they'd be my top tips.
That's brilliant, thanks. And I think the most encouraging thing from that, it's easy to kind of get focused on the doom and gloom in the job market and the economic situation at the moment, but it's great to hear people are getting jobs and people are going to interviews and securing them with the right help and guidance. So that's really, really good to hear. Let's move on to talk about skills. The job market's always changing, and we're expecting that COVID-19 would probably accelerate some of those changes. Yvette, how can a job seeker make sure that they're keeping their skills up to date?
So I think that anything to do with either updating your skills or learning new skills has to be something that you want to do. I wouldn't do it just for the sake of it. It has to be something that's going to add to your confidence, and if it gives you confidence, I would do it. So for example, I know people that are in the service industry at the moment, and they're looking likely to lose their jobs, and they're brushing up on basic IT skills because that gives them confidence. But it doesn't always have to be a course. It could be that you go out and do some voluntary work, and that teaches you new skills, and it's something that you can talk about. And also, I think that the world is changing. How we're delivering this meeting right now. And even as a coach, I've got to learn, how to use Zoom rooms and put people in breakout rooms. And so, as people are going into new jobs, there might be skills that they could learn in this time whilst they're looking that would help in those new roles, because I think this is going to go on for a while.
Great. James, what would you say on skills?
Well, one of the things that has struck me, and it's been very apparent during the lockdown, is the amount of people who have been coming on to read.co.uk to look for courses, and there are over 40,000 courses listed on our website. Many of them are free of charge, and many of them are very reasonably priced. I'm talking £25 or less, and they're digital courses that people have been subscribing to in really large numbers, because you can learn so much now at home, and you can upskill really effectively at home. And this is a really good time to do that, because we're locked down, or have been, and we look like we will be for a while yet. So this is a sort of moment where you can upskill, and a lot of those courses come with certificates and diplomas, and that really enables you to upgrade your CV. So I think this is a good time for doing that. And there's so much amazing resource online now. I was talking to a young man who's doing some construction locally to where I live, and And I said to him, you know, he said he was building a new house for his parents. I said to him, how do you learn how to do that? And he said, on YouTube. So
Yes.
you can learn that on YouTube. You can learn pretty much anything.
Wow.
And I think it's really exciting for that reason. And I would encourage people to go out and have a look what's around. And there's also a huge amount of stuff that's, you know, useful personally. You know, one of the courses I was looking at, the sort of most popular that I would never have guessed is the third most popular course that people have been availing themselves of on our site was Understanding Autism. So, you know, there are lots of courses that help people understand themselves and others better, that help you develop new skills. And I think just sort of making people aware of that is a good thing to do, because, you know, you can take it or leave it, but it's a good moment, I think, to upgrade skills and to keep alert to what skills might be coming next.
Definitely. We actually ran a poll on Twitter over the past few days around how job seekers are approaching skills. And I was really surprised to see that 50% of job seekers we were engaging with weren't investing anything in skills over the past few months. And I would have thought that through, you know, many people being on furlough, there would have been perhaps a bit more of an intention to invest in skills. And I think, you know, I was.
But you're a glass half empty guy. I'd look at that and say 50% of people are investing in skills. And, you know, that's, you know, over a sort of 3-month period, that's pretty amazing. I mean, if you'd asked that, you know, last year, 3-month period, how many of you invested your skills in the last 3 months, it would have been a lot lower than 50%.
There you go.
Maybe
maybe I'm being too negative.
And I think it's pretty amazing, and I think that number will go up. And the other thing is, you know, we don't know what skills are going to be most in demand in 5-10 years time. So keeping a beady eye on what's coming is also good. And you know, there are some jobs now that are really highly paid that didn't really exist 3 years ago. DevOps and these sort of roles that, you know, if you'd picked that up early on and learned the skills required, you'd be in a really hot seat now. You know, the skills agenda is continuously changing. It's very exciting, really, because there are so many new things coming, and this pandemic will only accelerate and increase the options for people because so much is changing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think also it's worth thinking about transferable skills, because so often people think that they're like, you know, when you're trained in one area, you know, that's all you can do. And actually, if you look at a good candidate is a good candidate. So, you know, from somebody that used to place people, I think that you always know when somebody walks in and you think, oh my goodness, I could find them a job so easily. And so that's stuff that you can't learn. You know, skills can be learned, but I think when you think about what's transferable, and you are going to go into a different type of industry maybe now, because there's certain areas where we don't need so many people, maybe in the leisure industry, but we need contact tracers. So, you know, what is it you can take with you from your last role and bring to these new opportunities when it comes to skills?
Well, the other point here to really stress, and Yvette's right, is that mindset trumps skill set. So, you know, we've done research over many years, and this was a subject of a book I wrote a decade ago called Put Your Mindset to Work. But mindset trumps skill set. So, you know, we know that in, you know, 10 years time, there'll be certain qualities we will look for in the people who join our organization. And, you know, top of the list is honesty and integrity. You know, another is adaptability or flexibility. Another is resilience. And these are mindset qualities. So as well as developing our skills, I think we can also work on our mindset. And this is probably a good time to do that, because it has been a big test of our resilience and adaptability. And just reflecting on that and what we've learned and how we can carry that forward, I think is a useful thing to do now as well. Because when we ask, you know, I've surveyed thousands of employers all around the world. You know, when we ask them, you know, if you had 2 candidates, who would you choose? The one with all the right skills for the job, but not the desired mindset, or the one with the desired mindset, but not the complete set of skills? 97% would choose the candidate with the desired mindset. And that's really striking. And that's because skills come and go. I mean, that you have to learn new skills all the time. And learning and being open to new things is a mindset issue.
Yeah, that's really a telling statistic, isn't it? James, sorry, Yvette, go on.
Well, no, I was just going to say I've done some work around the growth mindset, you know, and in Carol Dweck talks about it in her book. I think it is called Mindset, and it's all around moving from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. And the fixed mindset believes that their skills are limited, and there's a cap. And the growth mindset is all around that, you know, we're always learning. And I think it's difficult when you're in times like this, because it's really tough and it's very easy to go down the negative route. But if we can get ourselves into a growth mindset where we can spot opportunities, it's going to put us in a better position.
Yeah, great point.
But and that's we talked about the 3G mindset, to take the theme along, and that's based on a growth mindset. But the 3Gs were good, global, and grit. So, you know, these were the qualities that made people, you know, successful. Ultimately, we discovered, and they were also the qualities that made people attractive to hirers. But good was all about kindness, but also integrity. Global was about having an open mind to new ideas, new experiences, new people. So the growth aspect that you're talking about, Yvette, and grit was simply resilience and tenacity and the ability to pick yourself up and carry on. And I think those are the sort of key mindset elements that help people move forward and that we can all develop and grow.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thanks, both. James, within the Keep Britain Working campaign, we've discussed a lot about how this economic crisis will affect certain groups more than others. So, for example, the evidence suggests that young people will be disproportionately affected by the economic crisis that we're facing. Do you think your approach to a job search should change depending on what stage of your career you're at?
Sure. Well, unfortunately, the consequences of the pandemic, which are still to play out, will, I think, affect the most disadvantaged the most, and that's something that needs to be addressed both, you know, at a corporate level and also at a societal level. So, you know, I'm concerned that, you know, people from minority backgrounds, young people, people with disabilities, single parents, all of them are going to be affected, perhaps more so than others, by this pandemic. And I think it's important, you know, if you're a young person, to position yourself as well as you can at this point. And I've come across a lot of young people who've moved into working in supermarkets and in deliveries and supporting their community or helping out in care homes, and I think those are really good things to be doing at the moment, if you can, because when the time comes where you're going for a job interview in the future and this year appears on your CV and that's on it, that your interviewer will be impressed and will think that, you know, you're someone that they consider for their organization. So it is difficult, but there are lots of things that we can do, you know, signing up. I know the NHS got a huge number of volunteers. I think most of them haven't had much to do. But even just doing, you know, making yourself available was good. You know, there are also people who are working really hard doing deliveries. There are quite a lot of options. There are different apps you can get for Amazon, where if you want to do, you know, self-employed delivery stuff. So I think it's important to sort of play your part, you know, be engaged, be part of the effort to improve things and put this period behind us. And there are lots and lots of different ways you can do that once you start thinking about it.
Great. Yvette, have you got anything to add to that?
Well, no, I sort of feel that that's covered quite a lot. I think it's a lot around flexibility. As James was saying, you know, this is a time, I think all ages, all stages, all groups, it's a time when everybody expects people to be doing different things. So as with the race mechanic becoming an ice cream man, and then a lady I know down the road, a young person, was working in a restaurant, and she went off to work in a manufacturing organisation for the summer, packaging up stuff to send out online. And I know someone else who was in a corporate role, who's now doing a key worker role, driving and delivering. Actually, he's completely loving it and enjoying being out on the road and doing something where he feels he's adding value. So I think this has created a lot of different kinds of opportunities. And as James says, it's whatever you get out there and do is what it's going to add to your tapestry. It's adding to your story. It's something you're going to be talking about in the future. And who knows where it will lead you.
In my, I would agree with what Yvette's saying. And in my book, Life's Work, I talk about 12 ways to fast track your career. There are actually 12 proven ways that I've observed over the years to fast track your career. And I think there are 3 that I particularly pull out at the moment for young people. And one is, and it's amazing how hard people find this, but one is ask for help. And that's, ask people for their input, their advice, their information. Use your network and you ask for help. So if you know someone who's working in an area and you see them and they seem to be quite enjoying it, ask them about it and ask how you get in, and you'll be surprised that 5 minutes later they might be putting you in touch with their boss. But if you don't ask for help, you'll never know. And I think it's really important to ask for help. The second is play poo sticks. This is a point I like to make. And poo sticks is a game you win by dropping your stick off the bridge into the fastest flowing water if you're Winnie the Pooh and Piglet. And the metaphor here is play poo sticks by dropping yourself into fast flowing waters in career terms. So there'll be certain parts of the economy that are really moving. And this situation has changed that, and certain new parts are moving more quickly. So really study the landscape and the river and make sure you try and jump in a current that's really moving, because that will take you further forward in your career. Because you don't have to be the best manager, but if you're in fast flowing water, you'll do well, and because the business will carry you along with it. And the third thing is find a boss you can learn from. In the beginning of my career, I worked for a remarkable couple called Anita and Gordon Roddick, who started The Body Shop, and I learned so much from them. And I think if you can find a boss you can learn from, that will serve you for a long time after.
Great, thank you. Finally, before we move on to some questions for the audience, you both shared great advice. I'm sure everyone on this call would have found useful. The current situation, I'm sure, have left many people feeling despondent, especially those people who've lost their jobs. So Yvette, maybe you can just briefly tell us, what advice could you give us about getting into the right mindset for the job search? We've talked about mindset a lot. What advice could you give?
Well, I think we can't underestimate the impact that losing your job has. And I think the first step is just to take a breath and absorb what's happened, because it's huge. And I think to be kind to yourself, because it's very natural that, you have a lot of internal dialogue going on when something like this happens, and you could be angry with yourself or others, but just to be kind to yourself. And, this is a global thing. Also, to then really realize that you do have a choice. You can go down the negative route, which would be very easy to do, or you can get yourself into the right mindset to go forward and take the next step. And I think that's only you know how to do that, what works for you to get you into that place. I'm a big fan of Brené Brown. She talks about vulnerability. She's done TED Talks and Netflix documentaries. She's fantastic. And she's done study on vulnerability. And they measure vulnerability by bravery, by how vulnerable people are willing to make themselves. And I think that when you're going to look for work and when you've lost your job, you're going to be feeling vulnerable, but that's okay. But you still have to be brave, and you still have to put the next foot forward and start the next chapter. And I think being flexible is the key. As we've been talking about throughout this, it might not be the perfect opportunity knocking on your door, but there might be a stepping stone or a bridge that's going to lead to that perfect opportunity. So it's just being brave and taking a small step and being open to opportunities is what I would say.
Brilliant. James, anything to add on to that?
No, that's really strong advice, and yeah, I mean it's a very difficult thing when this happens, and I would say it would be good if you could think about it in a way perhaps like this. Look, in the future, when you look back on this time when you lost your job, you say to yourself, I'm glad that happened because of the things that you've done subsequently, and because of the way you responded. Because as we were talking about earlier, life is a series of chapters and episodes, and this is just one. So, you might have lost your job or suffered some adversity. And is it possible, I ask this as a question, is it possible to turn that into a fuel that will carry you forwards to a place that is better? And that takes time and it takes thought, but it is possible. And when we look at the most inspiring people we read about and have come across, they've often experienced awful adversities, but they haven't been crushed by them. They've turned them into power almost. I think of Nelson Mandela was the shining example of this in the last century. And so that is something that I think is worth turning your mind to. What would have to happen next for you to be able to look back on this moment when you lost your job and you say, well, I'm glad that happened because.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Thank you. We're going to move on to some audience questions. It's great to see people engaging on the chat and lots of great questions coming in. We've had a couple submitted in advance as well. The first question I'm going to ask you both is from Fran. Fran asks, if you're open to a wide variety of roles, is it possible to articulate that within your CV without spreading yourself too thin or sounding desperate? James, what do you think about that?
Well, it's a fact that when people look for jobs on our website, the most common search is not the job description, like manager or baker, or it's Swindon or Preston or wherever it is they want to work. So, a lot of people are just looking to find a job that will sustain them for a period of time. And that's totally normal and that's totally right. And I think if you look at your CV, just bear in mind, and I always stress this, that a job is a problem to be solved. So whoever is looking at your CV on the employer side, what sort of problem will you be solving for them? Is that clear on your CV? So whoever you send it to, you should be giving that thought so that you can present yourself in a way that's going to make it likely that they're going to ask you for an interview and hire you. So, I think there's a sort of term in recruitment, spray and pray, where people send CVs out to everyone in the hope that someone might pick one up. That does not work. That devalues you as an applicant. So I would not advise that. But you can create a good CV, which you could send to a number of prospective employers that doesn't do that and positions you as a good candidate. So I think looking at your CV in a strategic way is really important.
Great, thank you. Yvette, before I move on to the next question, anything that you'd like to add on to that?
No, I think James has covered that. I mean, if there are really good CV writers out there, and it's not everybody's skill to write a good CV. Obviously, fantastic templates as well, but sometimes it might be helpful to have somebody help, pull the right questions out to help put it down on paper for you.
Great, thank you. We've also had a question from Vicky, who asks, I'm keen to move into a sector where I don't have any experience. In a competitive job market, how should I approach this? Yvette, do you mind fielding that one first?
I think it's great, Vicky, that you want to try something new. We've got one life, and I'd even use my sister as an example here. She was a biomedical scientist. I haven't told her I'm going to use her. And she, when she had children, she did a photography course, and it was just a hobby. And she's now a really well-known photographer. I mean, it's absolutely incredible going from science to photography. So I say, if you want to give something else a go, give it a go, and think about your transferable skills. As we talked about earlier, there will be stuff that you've already got that you can sort of pitch at this new area you want to move into, and then ask for help. Ask for help. There will be people that It's about just getting a foot in the door, maybe you have to take a drop in salary to start, but there will be a way.
James, anything you'd want to add to that?
Only that I think enthusiasm is infectious, and you can't really fault enthusiasm. So if you're presenting yourself as super enthusiastic, really keen, really interested, that will make you quite an appealing applicant. And and if you can then support that with transferable skills or other courses that you've done either online or elsewhere, that will all help. So it's quite possible to transfer into a new area. Lots and lots of people do, as Yvette just described her sister very successfully. And I think you want to have a plan about how you're going to do that and go about it, where you call upon all the resources that are available to you, whether it's asking for help, whether it's doing new courses and qualifications, and whether it's presenting yourself in a certain way. But enthusiasm will carry you a long way.
Brilliant, thank you. We've had a question from Tracy, and maybe I can pitch this one to James in the first instance. Tracy asks, are infographic CVs becoming more popular, or employers wanting to still see a traditional CV? James, what's your view on that, using graphics and infographics on a CV?
Well, it's a good question, and Tracy, I think it depends very much what sort of job you're applying for. If it's a design-related area, or in marketing, particularly so. Yeah, if you can position yourself in that way, providing it's sort of well done, I think that would be a good idea. But one of the things I would say is that a lot of companies use computer screening now to look at CVs, and they tend to sort of use a common language. So if your CV is too different, if you're applying into certain sectors, that could disadvantage you. So be mindful of that. And I think if it passes what I call the 7-second test, if someone sees it and thinks, I'm going to put that in the keep pile, I want to see this person, then do it. That sounds good to me.
Great. We've had another question about CVs, and Yvette, maybe I can pitch this to you. This is from Inran, who's keen to understand what's the best way to tell your story on your CV.
Interesting. I really would get the YU book, because there are these 15 questions in it, and I think once you start to think about those questions, you start to be able to talk about yourself. And when you can talk about yourself, you can bullet point the key things that you want someone to know. So, as you know, they talk about the elevator pitch. If you had 5 minutes to tell somebody what the key things that you wanted them to know about you, I would sort of jot them down and then start to bring them to life on paper. That would be my advice, because people get really bogged down with too much data on a CV. They're trying to, I used to go on holiday, and my friend said to me, Yvette, you don't have to take your whole wardrobe with you. It's a holiday. You take just some outfits. And it's like, on a CV, you don't need to actually put every single thing you've done. It's just the highlights, the highlights of what you want someone to know. Does that answer your question, Imran?
James, anything else you'd want to add to that? I think that's really helpful about.
Well, not really. I think that I was just sort of pleased to hear the advice to get the book. But I feel like we should send the people on this. I'd almost want to send the people on this webinar a complimentary book, both the CV and the YU, if we can organise it, because you've spent time with us this afternoon. I'd like to do that, so we might try and do that separately, so that we're not flogging you books, but we're giving you them. I think would be good. And I think the fateful 15 of those questions, and they're meant that. What we discovered is that all interviews really come down to 15 questions. And so if, as Yvette says, you really are clear about how you'd answer these fateful 15, then you're in a good place to tell your story, and be it on paper or in person. And I would subscribe to her saying that's a good place to start. And the first question is, tell me about yourself. And if you haven't prepared an answer to that question, it's a big open question that can take you down all sorts of rabbit holes. So it's a good idea to have that one nailed. And I think it's quite straightforward if you spend the time, because you have a great story. I mean, you have your own life and journey to talk about, and people will be interested in it.
Brilliant. And thanks, James. Very generous offer to to give out your book there. So maybe if people email into keepwrittenworking@read.com, we can sort that out.
Definitely.
We had another question from Lisa, and James, maybe I can pitch this one to you. How can I avoid employers taking my year of temp jobs as a bad thing and not looking at it as me being adaptable?
Well, I certainly would not think of it as a bad thing. Quite the reverse. I think you need to describe it on your CV, perhaps a series of temporary contracts, or which agents working through an agency, that whoever it was, that took you maybe to certain places or did certain types of work. And you could also say where I learned X, Y, and Z. I think that's really valuable experience. And I would stress to anyone who maybe is out of work or trying to re-enter the labour market that temporary work is an excellent way of doing that, because it gives you the opportunity to get to know the companies. It gives them an opportunity to know you. It's a sort of try before you buy sort of scenario for both parties. And I would urge people to look for temporary work at the moment, because also that is the area that is growing. I mean, that's where the work is. So temporary work, I think, is an excellent. I would never hold that against someone. I would always. I mean, what you want to make clear is that you were working through choice as a temporary worker, not that you had a series of jobs from which, for some reason or other, you left after 3, 6, or 9 months, because employers don't like to see that. They don't like to see that because it makes them nervous. But if you have made a decision that you want to do temporary work and work flexibly, fantastic.
Yvette, any further thoughts on that one, on temporary work?
I mean, the fact is you're working, and it shows willing. It shows that you're out there trying to do something. And I think it's all about how you frame it. So if you believe it's a negative, then that's how you're going to sell it to someone. But if you turn it into a positive and frame it in the right way, of which it is, then I think it's only positive. And I know hundreds of people that have been, worked in interim roles that have led them to a great perm role. And it might be that, somebody is you take a lower rate or something, and then you end up with I've seen it happen where they get the perfect job through that, because somebody says, who's that? And, you start to get connected. So I think interim and any interim role is a fantastic way forward. Brilliant.
As I've kind of probably got time for one more question from the audience, and this seems like a good one to end on. So someone anonymously has asked, what are some of the good questions to ask at the end of an interview, when an interviewer asks if you've got any questions for them? James, what do you think about that?
Well, when can I start? It's a bit cheeky, but it shows you're keen. And maybe something about, what are you most excited about that's coming up here in your company that I'm happy to work on with you. Shows the sort of that you're looking forward.
Great. Yvette, anything to add on to that?
I like that last one. I think that's great. I just would say never say no. Always have something to ask.
Yeah.
I would always definitely, that is always going to come up, that question, and I'd always have something to ask.
Brilliant. I think that's probably all the time we have for questions. I know there was many more that we didn't have the opportunity to get to, so I'm really sorry about that. If you have a burning question which wasn't answered, please do get in touch with the Keep Written Working campaign, and we'll try and answer it as best as we can, either through James or Yvette. I wanted to say thank you to you, James and Yvette, for the time you spent with us this afternoon. It's been really helpful. I think some of the themes that have stood out for me is the importance of asking for help, the importance of being flexible in these times, and finally how kind of mindset and skill set are kind of equally important. And it's so important, particularly at this time, to have the right mindset going into the job search as well. So thank you both for joining us. Thank you to everyone who's been on the webinar and engaged. Just to plug a few things as we close the webinar now. Firstly, Yvette offers bespoke career and programs for senior leaders in business, covering a wide variety of issues. Yvette has her own website and would be delighted to be in touch with you. So please do look at Yvette and her details at yvettejeal.co.uk. We've mentioned quite a lot James's books and that kind offer that he made to give out some of the books to participants on this webinar. So if you get in touch with the Keep Britain Working campaign, I'm sure we can find a way of getting that to you. They're also available on Amazon, or other bookstores are available. And finally, to plug the Keep Britain Working campaign, we've mentioned it many times on this webinar. It's the reason that we're here. We'd love to keep in touch with you, engage with you on social media using the hashtag Keep Britain Working. Please get in touch with us using the email address there, or on the website keepbritainworking.com. There's lots of ways for you to get involved and lots of support and resources available to you. So thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I hope you have a great rest of the day, and thank you again to James and Yvette for giving your time so generously this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.